Welcome to Matters of DeCorum. I'm DeCorum. This is what matters to me. I have been working on this video for much too long. I've had to skip a few weeks going over stuff. Full disclosure, I bought the new edition of Dungeons & Dragons, bought all 3 books. Moreover, I bought a year of D&D Beyond, and I got my my online presence up to date. I've been through what there is. I've researched other commentary, which is something I normally don't do. Normally, I just, I prefer to let my commentary flow from me as the primary source. Couldn't do that this time. So, this is going to be my review of the 2025 edition of Dungeons & Dragons. And I'll sum it up here before I go into any greater detail. There isn't going to be very great detail, but summed up, it's fine. It's an edition of Dungeons & Dragons. It is as usable as any other edition. Maybe a couple of perks here and there, maybe some problems here and there, but ultimately, it's an edition of Dungeons & Dragons. One of the problems I'm having is that it's impossible to discuss this edition in any great detail outside of referencing the corporate structure from which it came and which affects its development to this day. And that's not something you'll want to hear about in your role-playing game. I don't want to have to track down how the company is doing or how they're acting or what their moral stances are and aren't if I want to make up a character and roll dice. But I felt it was necessary this time, and that's to their detriment. The 2025 edition of Dungeons & Dragons is the 2014 edition of Dungeons & Dragons, that being, it is the 5th edition of Dungeons & Dragons, with some alterations to organization, new artwork, fresh writing, and different perspectives on a couple of things. Thank you very much for following me along. This is Player's Handbook. You can make a D&D character. You can play a D&D character. You can equip your D&D character. You can level your D&D character. You will find you might think of the framework of the character a little differently. You will find bonuses to your stats. They do not come from your character species, formerly race, but rather from your character's background, which is fine. This could spark an argument about nature or nurture, but mechanically, it's no different. You get your stats, they're generated the same way. You get the same amount of bonuses you got in character creation straight out of the D&D 5th edition books, and carry on from there. You choose your character's backgrounds, what they used to do for a living, their species, their class, their stats. You equip them, and have at. A note I will make. There are guidelines in the Player's Handbook of the 2025 edition for if characters want to craft their own equipment. I like that a lot. Previous editions may have had these guidelines. They were not so well placed, so well referenced, so concise, or so effective. So that's a bonus. You've got that. That's good. That's your player's handbook. The most improvements I saw, the only thing that would, if I was going to buy one of these books as a dungeon master running Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition, it'd be the DMG. They grounded it. They took what was a book that it was better suited for writers of fantasy fiction than dungeon masters. I know there's a lot of crossover there. Still, they grounded it, and it's down to how to run the games, how to read the table, how to work the players, how to engage the scene, how to make it all function together, how to make it look like you know what you're doing. Good stuff. Very good stuff. How to improvise, how to create different elements to add to your game, how the dungeon master creates new magic items. And that's new to some degree. And a lot of it is just common sense. What most DMs would do is mental arithmetic. But if you've got a hard time with that sort of thing, or you're looking for official guidelines, they're in there, and they're suitable. They work. More to the point, what if player characters want to create their own magic items? There's also crafting rules in there in the DMG. I suppose because that's where the magic items are located, you wouldn't have put the crafting instructions for player characters to make magic items in the player's handbook. I might have, they didn't. But they're good guidelines. Again, they're mostly common sense. They're functional. They work. They're balanced. And yeah, having them in there, really good. DMG, quite the improvement. I would say, yeah, if any of the three books is actually a must buy, I'm going to buy one of these books to see what it's up. Which one do I get? DMG. Monster Manual is usable. It is usable. It is a collection of stat blocks. A collection of stat blocks with brief instructions or brief descriptions of the creatures described by the stat blocks, bereft of any meaningful organization. If you know the name of your monster, it's in the index. Well, it's in the table of it's in the listing of stat blocks after the table of contents, because the table of contents is worthless. The organization of the book is absolutely garbage. Just the worst organized book I've seen in a very long time, and all of their attempts to make it look like they tried to impose organization on it made it seem like they needed to put out a Craigslist ad for someone with library science degree or someone who had never indexed a book before or someone who knew the alphabet. If I'm going to be cruel to any of these books, and there's room for cruelty in each of these books, but if I'm going to be cruel to any one of the books, it's the Monster Manual. Garbage organization. They removed huge sections of lore. They make an effort to turn what monsters in the book can reasonably be presented not just as carbon paper cutouts, stamp and paste, but people as people. You know, an entire race is composed of savage brutes that are only interested in despoiling and killing, because that's generally not how civilizations work. And they've corrected that. That in general, I would consider an error, and they've corrected that error from a number of previous editions. So they did do that well-ish, kind of. They could really have. If there's a dragon in the book, you need to find it by the name by the color of the dragon, alphabetically listed, for the most part, usually. Or a dragon adjacent creature, same way. Kind of. Sometimes you need to know the age of the dragon to be able to find it alphabetically in the book. There is no unified dragon section of the book. There's no unified infernals or celestials section of the book. And that is to the book's great detriment, because I don't get a sense of hierarchy, of social function, of the civilization in which these things operate. It's just, here's a bunch of stat blocks, have at. And that leaves them open to have plenty of books come out down the line where they do the homework, and they do give you a community book for angels or demons or devils. I'm not buying this book to be set up for 5 more purchases. I'm buying this book because I want the information on monsters. I had that information in the 2014 release of 5th edition. That monster manual had all that information in there. It was fine. It worked really well. There was no reason to remove it. Organization for organization's sake, when their organization is terrible. The book is usable. The monster manual is usable. If once you want to stat blocks, you can go find your stat blocks. The stat blocks have a little bit more information in them. They're lined up a little bit better for a DM to use them during combat, so you can. They're more efficient. So the stat blocks themselves improved. Organization of the book, garbage. Absolute trash. Overall, throughout the books, the writing is acceptable. A little light. I could use more, but it gets the point done. It's grammatically correct for the most part. It does what it needs to do as far as the writing is concerned. It's a role-playing game. Boom. The math all works out. The organization is garbage. Seriously, if they released a new edition where they had someone with a library sciences degree come in and get them proper tables of context and bibliographies, not even a bibliography, just an index and a glossary in a meaningful way with proper cross references. Maybe I might buy a new edition just for better organization. Because, yeah. I'm going to say something about the art across all 3 books. It is colorful. You can see the stroke of inspiration that is there. It is somewhat more inclusive than previous editions have been, which is fine. That works. I like a nice inclusive hobby. But it is dripping with the application of AI. Now, I haven't talked a lot about AI or my stance on AI art. It says something that if I boot up Photoshop, which I do quite often, I just get, whether I want to or not, there's a panel that shows up over my overlay which is my AI options. Choose a foreground subject, subtract the background, replace the background with something that you describe verbally. That's interesting stuff to play with. They processed a good deal of the art through AI. And it started as AI art, or they applied AI to art they had. It gives certain pieces of the work, which is the artistic density in the book is massive. There's a lot of art, of big full screen, of full page splashes, poster size stuff. Areas where you take up a third of the page with art where some more text might have been handy. Look at you, background section. But where they applied the AI, it is clumsy and ham-handed and leaves the art looking poor, amateurish. It is mistakes made by only artificial intelligence and artists with neurological dysfunctions. I'm sorry, it's just, it doesn't work well. It doesn't serve the text particularly well. And there are so very many artists out there right now who are struggling, who would have been happy to have the opportunity, but they went this route instead. Not germane to the function of the game, just art should serve the game, and it served it poorly here. Also, I may have mentioned this before. I've definitely mentioned this several times before. There is a spectrum of art for a monster manual. At the good end of the spectrum, the Mind Flayer is gaunt and ethereal and otherworldly. It is something indescribably inhuman despite having a vaguely human form, and it is menacing for its otherworldliness. On the other end of the spectrum, the Mind Flayer looks like a guy in a suit waiting for 4 teenagers and a talking dog to rip off his rubber mask so that you find out why they were haunting the carnival. This is where the this is where the book is. Rubber mask, carnival, Scooby-Doo. And that's not the execution of the art. That's not AI. That is an artist or art direction that fails to grasp the subject in every meaningful way. Blah. Tangent. Back in the day when 4th edition Dungeons and Dragons came out, I was in the room at Gen Con when they announced 4th edition, when they talked about its features, when they spoke specifically about how important the online experience was going to be to it, where you'd have your tabletop virtually in front of you in the computer. You could move little figures around and do all of your calculations and stuff. It's going to help. And at the release of 4th edition, that component was missing. A lot of people will tell you terrible things about 4th edition. If that digital component had been there as had been promised, 4th edition might have done much better. It was a good half of the game. It is no one's fault at Wizards of the Coast that that didn't happen for 4th edition. A tragedy amongst the higher levels of the design team for the electronic experience. They Well, there was a tragedy, there was a death, the team never recovered, and that's existence, that's life, stuff happens. 2025 edition of Dungeons and Dragons was touted to come out with a virtual tabletop system all of its own. Since the 4th edition, dozens of virtual tabletop systems have come out, whether they're online, strictly online things, or software packages that you buy. There's a lot out there. It's a flooded market, but with the 2025 edition of D&D, there's going to be another one. They're going to release, I think it was going to be called Sigil, and it was going to be the end-all be-all of integrated tabletop experiences online to go with your D&D experience. No one knew it launched. The credit, it launched. Pardon me. It launched in an unusable state, and for corporate reasons, we're talking strictly business, I sent most of the design team to other projects, and they're letting like 4 people handle it. It's as good as it's going to get, and it's probably just going to get forgotten. No one uses it. It's not usable. History repeats itself. My group uses Owlbear Rodeo. It's free. Owlbear 2 has a membership structure. I think I've got a membership. But there are other software packages out there that I'm Spire Tales, a whole bunch that I'm just playing with, see if I can't get a sense of what will and won't work for me. For D&D to drop that ball that bad, for Wizards of the Coast to just, I could talk about why they dropped it, what happened with that process. That is all boardroom shenanigans, and I don't want boardroom shenanigans in my role-playing game. I don't need that affecting my enjoyment. And if they make it affect my enjoyment too much, there are plenty of other games out there. Will I play D&D again? Yeah, duh. Will I play 5th edition? Sure, it's a good edition. It's very functional. Will I use the material in these books? Yeah. Yeah, I will definitely be incorporating some of that. Will I be using the artwork for reference? No. Will I be relying on their organizational patterns? No. Do you need the 2025 edition of Dungeons and Dragons to enjoy Dungeons and Dragons? No. Get yourself a copy of 5th edition and have that and enjoy. If you really want the most up-to-date books, they'll prevent coffee cups from staining your tabletop just fine. They do the job of presenting Dungeons and Dragons in a way that it can be played. They're fine. They're not great. They're not unusable. They're dead smack right in the middle there. They're fine. And if Wizards of the Coast wanted to have a major influx of cash because of a new edition coming out, it needed to be better. It needed to be spectacular. It needed to take 5th edition and take it someplace new and exciting and expanded, and it does none of those things. It's fine. It's D&D. You walk into a 10-foot by 10-foot room. In the center is a chest being guarded by an orc. What do? Perhaps the strength of the 2025 edition is that you might be able to ask the orc if they're really into this line of work, or if this seems like a rational place for them to be stationed, and why don't you come work for us, because these people do not care about your needs. I've done that. It worked a couple times. Well, thank you for following me along on this particular... it took way too long to get out, and that's because I was more conflicted with my views and thinking, am I not seeing the things that are here that are worth it, or am I not seeing the huge pitfalls and craters? And no, what I wasn't realizing was that it's fine. Just fine. And given the market and the history of the work and all of the amazing people I have played D&D with over the past few years, over the years since 2nd edition AD&D, just fine isn't good enough, damn it. It needed to be so much more than just fine to justify its existence. It's fine. It's usable. And from my perspective, that's damning. Thank you for following me along on this particular ramble. I'm Scott Corum. This is what has mattered to me. I will see you next time for the next Matters of Decorum. Now over to Uncle Drac for the outro. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up. If you didn't enjoy this video, give it a thumbs down. Feedback is feedback. If there's any other topics you would like to hear Scott talk about, questions you'd like him to answer, subjects you'd like him to cover, please leave a comment down below. He will love getting your comment, and you will love leaving him one. If you haven't subscribed to this channel yet, why not? This channel is awesome. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button. If you do, you might also want to hit the little notification bell so you're alerted when these videos become available. If you would like to support this channel in a more substantial manner, we invite you to hit us up at the Patreon page, www.patreon.com/ScottCorum, and consider donating. Absolutely anything helps and allows us to create better content more often. In the meantime, thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you next time.